Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the annual BJUI lecture, and it's my great pleasure today to introduce Professor Manfred Wirth. Manfred will be well known to many of you in his various roles in the BAU, of which he is now Treasurer and Head of Communications. He started much of his urological career in Würzburg in the south of Germany, which I hope many of you know is a centre of excellence for Franconian and in particular wines. But he then in the 1990s moved to Dresden, where he now leads what is, he tells me, the largest urology department in the country. I'm pleased to say that he now grows his own wine in front of his house, but he tells me it's far too expensive for me to afford. So I'm sure it's pretty good, pretty good. Well, as I say, he's I'm sure, well known to all of you. He remains a very active urologist, both clinically and in his research interests. He's a past president of the German Urological Association and of many other organizations throughout Europe. And he has, of course, been very actively involved in publications in urology for many years. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Manfred to deliver his lecture on his experience with biomarkers in prostate cancer.
Thank you very much, Professor Krishna Setia, for this very nice introduction, and also thank you very much for inviting me, especially Prakash Gupta, for giving this BJU International Guest Lecture. This is a great honor and pleasure for me. I would like to share today with you research work we have done in the last 5 years on novel non-coding RNAs as biomarkers and molecular targets in prostate cancer. You probably know that around 15 years ago, everybody thought that 95% of RNA is garbage because it's non-coding. But later on, the Big Bang occurred and everybody realized that those non-coding RNAs are really important because they are organizing our cells. And you know, also in normal life, production is only a small part of what the world does. Especially in London, you can see this with the banking system, 700,000 people working there just for organization, and they produce nothing. So this was a Big Bang in molecular biology. And the next thing was, 15 years ago, it did cost 100 million euros or $100 million around about to do a complete sequencing. 5 years ago, when we started it, it was about 10,000. Now it's down to 1,000. So that means 100,000-fold less than it was before. And you might think, and I think I want to convince you, that this will completely change the way we will look in the future to tumor cells and also to biology of all other diseases, also in urology. What did we do? This Revolution Consortium, it's an interdisciplinary consortium led by the Fraunhofer Institutes and universities. Fraunhofer is the biggest national company, we can say, which is supported by the federal states, which makes 2.5 billion euros per year in applied and translational research. It's not so well known as Max Planck, but that Germany has a nice industry. Fraunhofer is really responsible for a lot of that. And this is a group, it was led by the Fraunhofer Institute ICI in Leipzig, and the foundation of Fraunhofer put in 25 million euros in the past 5 years into this consortium. And we looked for the identification and validation of novel biomarkers for various diseases. and I'm just presenting you prostate cancer. And we wanted to develop new and novel diagnostic and prognostic tests. The studies on prostate cancer started with identification and validation of novel diagnostic and prognostic RNA biomarkers for prostate cancer. We did a whole transcriptome approach with particular focus on the promising long non-coding RNAs. We want to develop an improved diagnostic test to help to avoid unnecessary biopsies and to develop a prognostic assay allowing a better choice between local treatment, e.g. radical prostatectomy, and active surveillance. That was the first aims. Later on, a second came, and we'll show you that. We used archival frozen prostate specimens of patients undergoing radical prostatectomy. And we started in Dresden 24 years exactly, to freeze all prostate cancer specimens in liquid nitrogen. And this was key to do this. The stratification criteria was according to Gleason score and lymph node metastasis. You can see the stratification groups. We had low-risk groups, very low, medium, high risks, and control was tumor-free tissue from patients with BBH. And the endpoint was prostate cancer-specific death, and all patients receiving neoadjuvant treatment were excluded. The biomarker screening strategy was based on these three phases. First, identification. 64 archival frozen prostate tissue specimens were used from radical prostatectomy and BBH. We did a whole transcriptome next-generation sequencing with Illumina HiSeq. We did a trans-specific paired end sequencing with 200 million reads per sample, so it's really in-depth analysis, and did it from both ends, so really to make it as good as possible. And the phase 2 was a confirmation on prostate tissue samples, 256, with custom microarrays covering all transcripts found differentially expressed by sequencing, plus all annotated RNAs. These were 140,000 probes in total. And the validation phase 3 is ongoing. We want to do it on up to 400 cases. And we do this now in a quantitative PCR in independent clinical cohorts, biopsies, urine, and blood samples. This was the tissue sampling processing. We did about 150 sections generated from 700 cryosamples for RNA preparation. And you can see the first and the last of the section always went to the pathologist for staining. And this result is extremely important to have really good tumor and tumor-free material available. And only if the tumor content of the tumor tissue was more than 60%, then we used it. And in the control tissue, a maximum of 5% of tumor content was allowed. And the RNA quality needs to be very good. These are the first results. We found more than 2,000 genes with a significant differential expression between prostate cancer and BBH tissue. And we found some novel long non-coding RNAs with a high diagnostic specificity and sensitivity. We have now 42 sequences filed for patent. And just to show you marker examples in a custom array. These are three you can see on this slide. And you can really see that red and the yellow columns are really nicely separated. So tumor and the tumor-free control. And we have in all those an AUC of more than 0.94, which is pretty high. And if we combine 8 of these novel tumor markers, and this is just only in tissue, it's not in urine or in blood, we can clearly define between tumor and control already with an AUC of one which I couldn't believe, but it's possible. So this means only between prostate cancer and control. And then we did RNA sequencing in urine samples. First, we started using only the markers we had. But then we also did a complete NGS in urine samples, which was a lot of work, and this was done in the last months. And what you can see on this slide is that the median expression is given here, and here's the frequency. And you can see here BCA3, the median expression is quite low. And we have a lot of other markers differentially expressed, and this is our candidate, one of the new markers, which is excellent, much higher expressed, so we expect that we really can make a lot better test systems than those currently available. And here we have combined, also tested in urine, 3 of the novel biomarkers on the left side, and on the right side we included it with BCA3. And you can see the AUC is 0.85, and with BCA3 it's slightly better. But this is just the beginning. Because of the new data we have now with the complete sequencing in urine, we have found that other markers are also good to use in urine. But if we compare this with BSA or BCA3, which is shown there, the AUC of BSA is between 0.6 and 0.65, BCA3 0.68, 0.75. So we are way up of that already. And so we are really think that this test system will be available in the next year, that it can be used clinically. The next thing was we looked also to other tumor entities, and this was a very nice, is a nice example of one of those novel long non-coding RNAs. We called it TAPIR. It's not only overexpressed in prostate cancer by 5.5-fold, but also in colon and especially in kidney cancer, and to a certain amount also in breast cancer. And if we silence this RNA by siRNAs, then we can see that this is a growth curve of those growth curves. Then those with the silencing, nothing occurs. But with the control, there is a growth. So we can have a complete growth arrest. So it's not only for diagnosis, maybe also for therapy. And we looked also what is the reason. And it's probably apoptosis. You can see here that captase activity, which is the normal, it's 100, that is normal. It's reduced by 40, it's activated by 40%. And if you look to cell viability, normal cells 100%, and it's reduced also by around 40%. And this causes a complete arrest of the tumor cells. And if you look now in the regulation of the cell cycle, then you can see that TAPI is knocked down almost all cell cycle-related genes. And this is something which is quite interesting, that there is not only a target for diagnosis, maybe also for treatment. And we are just at the beginning. The next step was prognosis, prognostic biomarkers for prostate cancer. That was also the goal. And we worked here together with the Institute in Leipzig, and there is really excellent. It's a self-organizing maps. This is a machine learning approach, and they're used to identify prognostic markers in microarray data. And this SOM identifies co-expressed genes, so-called metagenes. And spots were then checked for their association with prostate cancer-specific death. You can see an example. The spot there on the right side was strongly associated with a pure prognosis. So it's with a high expression, had a high risk of dying of prostate cancer, and those with a low expression not. And this is one example. Here I can show you 4 examples of this. And interestingly, if you look to the left part, this was all those were cell cycle regulation, long coding and RNAs. And all those are also contain the myriad Polaris test assay. But those are composed of 100 to 150 different genes. And then the next is also extremely interesting because a high expression, no patient died, because those genes are with growth inhibition related. And then we have extracellular matrix, cell-to-cell communication, carbohydrate metabolism. So we look for different approaches because the tumor cell does not metastasize because it's dividing. There are different things which causes the metastasis, and this you can here really see. And this is completely based on next generation sequencing. This is different from this urine test where you can do a small test with 4 to 10 genes. Here you have hundreds of genes, but $1,000 for a whole sequencing is not a problem. You have only to know where to look for. And this is what we did. And this is ongoing and is learning. And if you look now to this prognostic transcript clusters, you can see here if we combine these 4 spots, then we are coming to an AUC of 0.79. But this is still the beginning of the learning. It can improve only. If you compare this with 2 commercially available test systems, you can see that they are not as good as what we found here. However, it's based still on small numbers, so the confidence interval is quite high. So we have to do more research on that, and we are planning a multi-center study on that. If you see what tests are currently available, there are no one of them is based on such a study which we did. If you look to Polaris, it looks for cell cycle associated genes which were known. They just combined them. Decipher did it with transcriptome, Oncotype, TX. They look for tumor-associated genes with 17 mRNAs. We look for hundreds. And also for the complete cell, how a cell is living, not only for a cell cycle, but also for arrest and all what I showed you. So what we want to do in the next step, we want a non-invasive, minimal invasive prostate cancer detection in urine or blood, and it will start definitely with urine. Blood sets down the road several years because it's very, very difficult to find tumor cells or RNA in the blood. And we want also to establish a test system for the prediction of prognosis, which then would ideally best a learning system to make it better and better. So in summary and perspective, we conducted a whole transcriptome analysis by NGS techniques and microarray studies on retrospective prostate cancer tissue cohort. We found them this long coding RNAs highly specific and a lot of new novel markers. And these biomarkers are detectable in urine samples, and the prospective validation is ongoing. The study also reveals transcript clusters, I explained it to you, so it's called metagenes, with high prognostic value. And we believe that the results possess a high potential to develop improved diagnostic, mainly urine-based, and prognostic biopsy-based tests. And first functional studies on selected non-coding RNAs shows that they seem to be also potential therapeutic agents. I want to thank you for your attention, and it's a pleasure to be here. And this is a nice view of my home city, Dresden. And if you haven't ever been there, it's at least as nice as Liverpool. Thank you.
Just like to say thank you very much for that very elegant and erudite summary of your work and putting in perspective what is, of course, a field that's of extreme interest to all practicing urologists. So we're very grateful to you, Manfred, for coming over, and very enjoyable talk. Thank you.